Okay, I gotta complain about this because it drives me crazy, and I think I see it way too often on any video that discusses evolutionary biology. So basically, have you ever been watching a video that talks about biology, whether it be medicine or, zoology or whatever, and then all of a sudden it starts talking about selfishness or altruism? Have you ever wondered where that comes from? Well, one major source of it is Richard Dawkins's The Selfish Gene, which is a book that was published about 50 years ago. And it's just really infuriating to see this, everywhere, just because, I'm just going to be real with you. After reading The Selfish Gene as a big part of, the research that I did into Richard Dawkins and, the so-called affair and all that crap, it became, very clear to me that, selfish and altruism is just, a really bad model to, try to explore these things, and I always felt like there was something really fundamentally wrong with that choice of words. So, to put into some perspective, right, the basic argument for the selfish gene, right, is that, essentially, genes proliferate themselves based on essentially trying to, continue to exist. That's what selfishness essentially is. And I think, one of the most infuriating things about the first chapter of The Selfish Gene, after just kind of, breezing through it again, is that it's literally just, Dawkins just, desperately trying to defend using this term of selfish, which is just, I'm sorry, if you have to spend a whole chapter basically explaining why you're using the word language selfish and why you shouldn't imply it in all these other ways, maybe you should reconsider the word that you're using to describe it. I am not kidding. Just look at how much he just talks about defending his use of the word selfish. It's just kind of ridiculous, right? And while this book is in response to various biologists in the field, such as Konrad Lorenz and a few others I can't remember on the top of my head, there's also just a weird political motivation in it. And what I mean by weird is that, in my opinion, I don't think it's really possible to separate politics from biology in a serious analysis. In fact, this is kind of what Dawkins tries to do in the first chapter, and it comes off as really, weird and awkward. There's a part where he infamously talks about how he cares more about the population of whales than he cares about, homeless people, and it doesn't really occur to him how those two things might be related, or, how they connect together, or, it's just, weird, because it really feels like Dawkins depends very heavily on, all of this extra baggage just to make the idea of selfishness work. And so the way that I kind of interpret his ideas in biology in a more I guess salient way, in a way that's more compatible with, I would say, modern biology and modern evolutionary science, I don't like to use the term selfish. I like to use the term existential, or an existential function, because really the question is about whether or not a function can continue to exist, whether that be a gene or, a phenotype or whatever. I think that's another limitation of the selfish ontology, the selfish gene ontology. I think the selfish gene does a very good job at highlighting how much power or influence that genes have, but I think it's just such a overly fascist way to kind of, and I know that's I know that sounds like a meme for me to say fascist science or whatever, but it's when you really think about it, it's such a fascist, overbearing way to analyze biology, to try to reduce everything down to selfish gene interactions. We don't do that with programming. I hope you guys, I think now that biology is getting a lot more involved with scripting and stuff, they understand this idea better, but That's not how programming or software works, right? We don't just analyze the machine code. We analyze more abstract functions such as heuristics and stuff, and that can be also very valuable with, you know, analyzing and understanding evolution of software and things like that. So, like, just focusing on selfish genes, right, and this property of selfishness, right, really limits your ability to analyze and scope possible interactions and evolutionary, like, shit. Like, how do you seriously, like, I'm sure he talks about it later in the book. I haven't read the rest of the book in a very long time, but how do you really reconcile with Occam's razor, aka the simplest explanation is probably the most accurate or correct one, the one without all the extra baggage? How do you reconcile that with trying to explain something like, you know, two species mutualistically evolving together, such as, like, the fig wasp, right, with just selfish genes? Like, doesn't it make more sense to explain, like, larger structures and things like that? And you might say, oh, well, all of those structures are coalesced from selfish genes. And the thing is that there's, like, no evidence, in my opinion, to actually support that claim, right? Like, you can go and say, oh, well, the genes build up the larger structures, but, like, I think anybody in any other science or field or engineering knows that, you know, not all of the value is transmitted on the level of the molecular. It's actually this sort of, like, super complex intersection of a bunch of things, or rather the molecular of one surface. It's actually like an intersection of a bunch of surfaces, and they're all interacting on different levels and shit, and it's very complicated. And that's kind of like, it's kind of just infuriating to see this reductionist view of, like, just genetics and evolution just proliferate everywhere. Because, like, the final thing I really want to point out is that I really want to stress that Richard Dawkins focuses on selfishness for two reasons. One, selfish gene is a catchy-ass title, but the more important reason is that I feel like the selfish gene is partially motivated in sort of like this justification for British imperialism. Like, it's very hard to separate Richard Dawkins from, like, the superiority complex of the Anglo imperialist kind of, like, mindset. I mean, he's literally born in British occupied Kenya in 1942, and he talks about his experiences in Kenya like it's a fucking field trip with no self-awareness, anything. It's so obnoxious. And then he'll hide behind it to say that this is why I'm not racist. It's because all humans are from Africa, or whatever deranged bullshit. And it's just like, what the really? Really? Like, you can't tell that the reason why that he is trying to say that selfishness is fundamental and all altruism is descended from selfish behavior is because he's trying to reduce everything to an economy that resembles capital. Like, isn't it interesting that pretty much every example that he provides of so-called altruistic behavior is focused on the family? Like, he deliberately forgets a lot of examples that, you know, express a much just wider space. And I think this is part of the reason why he's afraid to actually, like, seriously engage with humans in his discussion. Like, he goes on about the selfish genes of Chicago gangsters or whatever, but, like, he really doesn't want to embrace this discussion with humans because he believes that, like, society provides, like, a barrier from this kind of shit because, like, society works differently. It doesn't use selfish genes. But at the same time, society's also constructed around these meme things, which I'm just gonna be real with you. I'm also skeptical of the existence of memes. I mean, I'm gonna be real. I think everything is just machines interacting with each other. Even genes can be reduced into these, like, complex forms that, you know, express differently under different circumstances based on, like, viral infections and shit. So, like, are you really gonna try to convince me that, you know, there's a fundamental social object too? Like, what the fuck is this shit? And it's just crazy how this stuff is just so integrated. I am convinced that nobody who goes around and says, like, genes are selfish or biology or evolution functions in a selfish way has actually read the first chapter of The Selfish Gene, because it's fucking embarrassing. It's genuinely embarrassing. It makes the rest of the book look like clown behavior when it's honestly not even that. But it's just so bad. Like, there's no fucking way. There's just no fucking way that these people have actually read the part where he's like, oh yeah, homeless people are less important than whales, and thought, yeah, that's really smart, bro. Like, it literally, even if you like his ideas, it just comes out of nowhere, and it just sounds so stupid. The whole thing just sounds completely defensive and insecure. Like, it really just sounds like he picked this title and he's like, okay, now I'm gonna fight off all the bullies who told me that I couldn't name my book this way. Like, it's pathetic. But yeah, I just prefer the term existential, because not only does it not restrict itself to a particular plane, specifically the gene plane. You can analyze it in all sorts of ways, whether it be phenotypes or, you know, sub-biological chemistry or whatever fucking bullshit. You could expand evolution beyond just this stupid obsession with just genes, which, by the way, requires a human to figure out what is and is not a gene. You know, that whole observer problem again. And then the other problem is the whole language of selfishness itself. It produces this motive. Like, chemistry doesn't have a motive, okay? Chemistry doesn't have an end goal. Neither does desire. Shit just happens. Things pull together in the way that are the path of least resistance from a particular point in time. Right? Like, none of this fucking bullshit about how genes are motivated to function in a certain way. And again, like, Dawkins spends so much time trying to correct himself after choosing this title because of this problem. And it's like, you know, this problem wouldn't exist if you weren't trying to inject this imperialist logic into your biology. You stupid fuck.